amigos, Jim and Mai here from Spanish and Go.
Your resource for learning real-world travel Spanish.
Today we're going to tell you everything you need to know about tipping in Mexico.
From tipping at a restaurant to an all-inclusive resort, and
we're even going to tell you some weird situations where you wouldn't imagine that you had to tip in Mexico. So make sure you watch until the end.
And if you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe for more travel and Spanish tips.
Empecemos. So let's get started with tipping at a restaurant. This is probably the most common situation where you're going to be tipping when you visit Mexico.
That's right. So just like in the United States, you're going to tip at least 15% at a restaurant. If the service is really good, tip up to 20%. But if your bill is 50 pesos or less, tip at least 10 pesos. If you tip any less than that, it's going to come off as you're a cheapskate and everyone's going to hate you.
Yes.
No, you don't want to be looked at as a cheap gringo. Make sure you're tipping at least 10 pesos, even when the food seems so cheap and it's over 10% of the total bill.
Mm-hmm.
What about tipping for street food, Mai?
You don't have to tip when you are getting tacos or any other kind of street food, but if you really want to, just make sure that, again, you tip at least 10 pesos.
Moving on, we're going to talk about tipping at accommodations. Do you tip at a hostel, at an Airbnb, at a hotel, an all-inclusive? What's the deal with that?
So if you stay at a hostel in Mexico, you actually don't have to tip. Tipping at hostels in Mexico is not expected, so don't even worry about it. What about an Airbnb?
Airbnbs don't expect you to tip at all. That's included in the service fee, so don't worry about tipping at all in that situation. But hotels are a whole different thing.
There are many different situations where you're going to be tipping when you stay at a hotel. So, for example, if you get help from a bellboy or a chauffeur, valet parking, any of those are going to be expecting a bill of at least 20 pesos if you're staying at a decent hotel, but if you're staying at a more expensive hotel, tip at least 50 pesos.
And there are other situations at a hotel where you would tip as well. Anything to do with food or drink, you're going to tip just as you would normally at a restaurant. Now for housekeeping, you want to tip at least 50 pesos a day. You don't want to tip all at the end of your stay. Tipping every day, at least 50 pesos, will make sure that the person who's cleaning your room actually gets the money. Now for the big question. Everyone wants to know, do you tip at an all-inclusive resort? It sounds like everything's included, so why would you have to tip?
Well, tips are not included in the all-inclusive resort, so you do have to tip people at an all-inclusive as you would tip at any other hotel.
Right, just because you paid ahead of time doesn't mean that the people who are going to be serving you when you get there get anything extra. So tip at least 15 to 20% to make sure your drinks are strong and no one spits in your food.
Ew.
The first time I went to Mexico, I wasn't expecting that you're supposed to tip in these next two situations. Going to the grocery store.
Mm-hmm. If you go to a bigger grocery store, kind of like the Walmarts of Mexico, which are Comercial Mexicana, Soriana, Chedraui, etc., there is going to be someone bagging your groceries and they expect you to tip them. 5 pesos for just a couple of bags and around 10 pesos if it was more than just a couple of bags. So a lot of the times, people working at these kind of places are elderly and they rely on tips. So make sure you tip them. Now, another one that might sound a little weird to you is tipping at a gas station.
That's right. So when you go to the gas station, someone else will fill your tank for you. And when they fill your tank, give them 5 pesos. They also offer other services like cleaning your windshield, checking your oil, checking your tire pressure. And if you ask for any of these additional services, you should pay 10, 15 pesos depending on how much work they're doing for you. If you're visiting Mexico from the United States or Canada, there are a few different services where they expect you to tip or don't expect you to tip that might surprise you. Mm-hmm. One of them is going to the hair stylist.
Mm-hmm. So many years ago, it was not expected at all for you to tip a hairstylist or a makeup artist or barbers. Nowadays, it's becoming more and more common. So they might ask you politely if you would like to add a tip to the service, but in smaller places that aren't as touristy as maybe Mexico City or Playa del Carmen, tipping a hairstylist or a barber is not expected. So.
Right. A general good rule of thumb is if you're visiting a heavily touristy place, tipping's probably going to be expected. I've noticed in barberias, depending on the quality of the place I'm going to, they'll expect a tip. If you're going to a place where they'll shave your beard and give you a nice haircut and a massage, more like a salon type place, they do expect a tip. Another situation, tipping taxi drivers.
Mm-hmm.
You don't tip taxi drivers in Mexico.
Unless they help you with something. For example, if you go to the grocery store and the taxi driver helps you put all your bags in the car, and then when you get home, he helps you take your bags out, then tip him at least 10 pesos. If you notice that he took a different route and that route was faster or helped you get in time to your appointment faster, yeah, tip the person, again, 10 pesos. Also, if the driver is helping you with extra information to make your stay in this place nicer, like giving you recommendations and tips, then you might also want to tip 10 pesos again. Now, what about tipping on an Uber or a Lyft?
If you're in an Uber or a Lyft, tips are usually expected, and you're not always able to tip in the app. I would make sure you're carrying change with you just in case the application doesn't allow you to tip in that situation. And I should clarify, I think I've only noticed that with Uber. With Lyft, I think that's just part of the app, and no matter what city you're in, I'm not 100% sure on that. But I know we've used a similar ride-sharing app in Mexico, in Colima specifically, called Chauffeur Pro, and for that we did tip.
Mm-hmm.
It was like being like in an Uber, so I figured we should tip.
But nicer. So that was everything you guys needed to know about tipping in Mexico. We hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more travel and Spanish tips.
Now, did any of these surprise you? Did you know you have to tip at a grocery store? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys, and nos vemos pronto.
Adios!